What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Turnbuckle Topics podcast. I'm your host, Pat Deneen, and this is my review of AEW Dynamite, which took place November 8th. Now, overall, this was a quality show, much better than last Wednesday's Dynamite, although I know that's not saying much. A lot of great professional wrestling we got to see, typical for AEW. However, I did see issue with a couple of the ways the women were presented on this episode of Dynamite, whether it was a debut, a return, two of which we saw. I didn't like the way they went about it, so I'm going to get to that when we get to that specific segment throughout the course of this show. Outside of that, though, it was all right. Collectively, we saw the Icon Sting get a victory. Nothing crazy. Their opponents, we kind of knew from the jump that they were going to beat them, but always nice to see Sting in these last few months he has till he hangs it up this coming March at AEW Revolution. So this episode of Dynamite took place in Portland, Oregon. The show opened up with Tony Schiavone interviewing MJF, AEW World Champion, although that title hasn't been in his possession for the better part of a month since Jay White stole it from him. I can't believe that he doesn't have it back. He's just walking around one half of the Ring of Honor Tag Team Champions without his tag partner, Adam Cole. So he's missing pieces left and right. Tag partners, his world title. If I was him, I'd be knocking down Tony Khan's door at every opportunity. Not having my title for the better part of a month, I'd be on Dynamite. I'd be on Rampage. I'd be on Collision, making a whole stink about it. But that's just me. And you would kind of expect that from MJF, the type of guy he is, especially when he was a heel. Maybe not so much these days. I get it. He's moved over to a babyface, but come on. The guy needs his title. His Burberry title. Come on. So anyway, show opened out with Schiavone interviewing MJF. He says 3 seconds is all it takes to end a world title reign, and that Jay White should savor his 3 seconds because it's not happening again. Now, of course, he's alluding to last week's episode of Wednesday Night Dynamite when he teamed up with the Acclaimed and Daddy Ass going up against the likes of Bullet Club Gold, where Jay White pinned MJF in the center of that ring clean. Now, a lot of us were surprised that they would allow this. I know no titles were on the line. It wasn't a singles match, but still in all, for Jay White to pin MJF clean, it's not that he's not capable. We know he is. Jay White's great. The whole thing is he is the world champion here. Again, it's bad enough Jay White's been walking around with his title for the better part of a month, and now he's beating the guy, so might as well give it to him at this point. But anyway, so that kind of rubs me the wrong way, that happened last week and that MJF has not gotten his actual title back. Going into this next bit here, Adam Cole is via satellite with MJF, and he admits he's really worried about him as his best friend, and he knows he doesn't want to hear it, but if he wants to beat the Guns at Full Gear, he's going to need to accept Samoa Joe's offer. MJF does not want to hear it, of course, says he'll take care of Bullet Club Gold on his own after he takes care of Daniel Garcia tonight. Now, Daniel Garcia and 2.0 roll up to scoff at the idea of him being quote-unquote taken care of, and Max says he's giving Daniel Garcia a chance because he reminds him of himself and asks if he's getting a sports entertainer or a pro wrestler. And Garcia says he's getting the pro wrestler version of him tonight. Now, Roderick Strong, of course, he seems to always be around the corner whenever there's MJF. Roddy Strong and the Kingdom roll up. And this is after Roddy offers MJF tips in his capacity as the wrestling legend that he is. MJF, of course, scoffed at that and calls him a joke, walks off. And now that left Roderick Strong. They try to convince Adam Cole that Max is a fraud. So Adam Cole hangs up. Roddy says it's time to remind everyone exactly who he is. Now, this opening match was for the AEW World Championship that, again, Max does not have in his possession. So let's just hypothetically say that if Daniel Garcia were to have won this match, he would still be titleless because Jay White has been walking around with this thing, again, for at least a month now. So we have MJF defending the title he does not have against Daniel Garcia. Of course, 2.0 ringside, Matt Menard, Angelo Parker. They're always, like his shadow. They're always behind him in some capacity. Now, here we had the match starting off with some mat grappling. MJF in control. Tequila Sunrise was applied to Daniel Garcia, gets right to the ropes. Max taunting him with his own version of Daniel Garcia's dance. Daniel is not thrilled with that. Snapmare into a reverse chinlock, shifting MJF into the ropes. We see a disdainful slap. Garcia looking to dance, but 2.0 hop up in the ring and tell him to keep focused on the wrestling match unto itself. Collar and elbow into the corner. A break, and Max offers a handshake in the name of sportsmanship. Garcia swats it away and goes to dance, and MJF pokes his eyes anyway. Armringer, hammerlock body slam into a kneeling armbar, and MJF jaws at him in the hold. Breakaway off the ropes, front kick, armringer, inverted tilt-a-whirl slam, and we go to a commercial break. When returning from that break, Garcia then hits MJF with strikes, beating him down in the corner. His arm goes lame, but he's still able to land a German suplex to follow it up. See a one-arm dance, corner knees, rolling fisherman buster to no avail. MJF back with clubbing blows to the arm, but Daniel clobbers him and throws a suplex at him. Sidestep the knees in the corner, Max off the top with the double stomp. Shoulder breaker, hammerlock DDT. Garcia finds a way to kick out somehow, some way. A lot of back and forth. He ducks a Panama Sunrise. Drop kicks to the knee, take the champion off his feet. Drawing him back up, one-arm pile driver, near fall, sets up the Dragon Tamer. MJF, however, reverses it. Got the salt of the earth applied. Garcia was hurting. It doesn't seem like he could break free, and that's exactly what happened. MJF won this one by submission with his Salt of the Earth submission hold, retaining the AEW World Championship. Again, that's unfortunately not in his possession at the moment, but still. Post-match here, MJF offered a handshake, but 2.0 rushed the ring and pulled Garcia away before he can. And Max then says if he's going to keep following them, when this could be him. And he offers another handshake, and again, 2.0 pull him away, and they all leave collectively together. Now, it does seem like Daniel Garcia is going to go his own way sooner than later. I don't know if that necessarily is going to make him a babyface just by leaving 2.0 behind, but I do think it's time. As much as I do enjoy seeing the three of them together, they basically came into the company together 2.5, 3 years ago. And, they are a great group. They can make a hell of a run in the trios division if they were booked seriously. But I think it's best that Garcia goes off, does his own thing. Again, whether that's babyface, whether that's heel, whatever the case may be, I think that is the best case scenario for one Daniel Garcia. So after that, we get a promo video from Marc Briscoe about his match that will take place later in the night, actually the main event against Switchblade Jay White. And he says how he's ready to take him down to become the #1 contender for the AEW World Championship. Now, if Marc Briscoe were to have beaten Jay White, he would then face MJF at Full Gear. Again, we all knew this was not going to happen. Nothing against Marc Briscoe, but we just know from a booking standpoint that, Briscoe was not going to be taking Jay White's place, especially due to the fact of this back and forth ongoing feud that Jay White and MJF have had for the better part of 2 months now, holding on to MJF's title. I mean, come on. So here we had Sting and Darby Allin versus the Outrunners, Truth Magnum and Turbo Floyd. Knew this one would be over quick, that's for sure. Not just because it was Sting that was in the ring and he's only got a few months till he retires again at Revolution 2024, but still, we knew this wouldn't be much of a match, even with a hobbled Darby Allin. So the way this went, Magnum and Darby Allin start off. We see a side headlock from Darby, tag to Floyd, but Allin knocks him to the floor. Back inside the ring, they manage to get Allin on the wrong side of town, putting boots to him. He gets away and tags Sting in. The Outrunners stand strong against the Icon, but this one would be over in the blink of an eye. Darby Allin and Sting win by submission. Sting locks in the Scorpion Deathlock on Truth Magnum for the victory here. This is a farewell tour for Sting, quite literally, so you have to understand that even if the matches are brief or their opponents don't seem like much, this is all about showcasing Sting in the best way possible at the very end of his career. So just take it for what it is, enjoy it, don't look too deep beyond it, and it's easy to get upset and be like, what kind of match is this, or who are these guys they're going up against? Just take it for the simple fact that, Sting is going out the best way that he possibly can. And a lot of respect to him for sticking it out this long in his career, in his mid-60s. So now we move on here to Tony Schiavone moderating a sit-down contract signing between champion Hikaru Shida and Toni Storm. In black and white, of course. That's the way Toni Storm has done all of her segments and vignettes, or even when she makes her way out to the ring the past couple of months with this new character of sorts. So Shida then asks Toni Storm what happened to her and accuses her of just wanting attention for her silly acting. Toni responded with, Hikaru Shida ruined what was supposed to be her walking into Wembley as the AEW Women's World Champion, and then it happened again, and she couldn't make history, so she then became history. Toni ended up signing the contract, Hikaru Shida does, and we're all set for them to face off at Full Gear in about a week's time. Now, I will say this, and I know many would agree to this, is that this will be a great matchup. Don't get me wrong. Hikaru Shida, 3-time champion. Toni Storm, 2-time champion in her own right. But, there's not a whole lot of heat between the two. It's more of just like a funny, goofy, I want the title and that's it. And look, that should be part of it, the wanting the title. But, there's not a whole lot of tenacity and viciousness between the two. I know Toni Storm's character, even though she's a heel, is supposed to be more funny, and it's been very amusing, these segments she's had backstage, whether it's with RJ City, even with Tony Schiavone, just the way she goes about things, and I'll give her that. But there's no real, fiery tension between these two ladies, and they're probably the only match on AEW Full Gear as far as the women's concerned. I don't know if I'm sure Chris Statlander will be booked for a match, but as it stands right now, I believe there's 6 matches set to take place at Full Gear. I know it's going to be upwards of 10 or 12 when all is said and done. Now, as far as this AEW Full Gear card is concerned, I know the AEW World Championship is on the line, MJF defending against Jay White. Of course, we have Hangman Adam Page for Swerve Strickland Part 2. We have another Part 2 match coming up for the AEW International Championship. Yet again, just like we saw at All In, Jon Moxley versus Orange Cassidy, and yet again, he's trying to take this title off of Cassidy. Then, of course, as I mentioned, we have Hikaru Shida defending her title against Toni Storm. We have a 6-man tag match with Christian Cage, Nick Wayne, and Luchasaurus versus Adam Copeland, Sting, and Darby Allin. And then we have MJF and maybe a partner. We'll see what happens if he'll go into this in a handicap capacity as he's done before Maybe he'll have Samoa Joe by his side. We'll see. Defending those Ring of Honor Tag Team Championships going up against the Guns on the 0 hour. So those are the 6 matches scheduled as it stands at this very moment in time. Again, they'll most likely add Chris Statlander defending her TBS Championship. Will it be against the likes of Julia Hart again, as we saw at Wrestle Dream? Will it be Sky Blue, Willow Nightingale, Red Velvet? I doubt it's going to be Willow or Red Velvet because those two are baby faces. Julia Hart, I'm not so sure it's going to be her getting a second opportunity. It could be. And will it be a Sky Blue? You know, Sky Blue has been teasing this uncertainty with the eye makeup the last couple of months. Even though she went up against Julia Hart last week and spit out that blue mist at Julia Hart, doesn't mean that she's completely on the good side of things either. She made it very apparent a week or two ago that in front of Chris Statlander, she said she didn't do it because she was doing it for the baby faces, but she went out there and helped Willow Nightingale because Willow's her friend. Sky Blue has not said that Chris Statlander is necessarily her friend, so we could very easily see Sky Blue going one-on-one with Chris Statlander at Full Gear. So I think it's either Sky Blue or Julia Hart going up against Chris Statlander for that TBS championship when all is said and done. I'm a little more intrigued with the TBS situation than I am with the AEW Women's World Championship. Again, that's not to say it won't be a great match. That's the problem with AEW. A lot of their stuff are great matches, but it's the build and the storyline between said competitors that sometimes we see issue with. I mean, I'm loving Orange Cassidy and Jon Moxley. I'm loving Hangman Adam Page and Swerve Strickland. Jay White, MJF, looking pretty good. So those 3 I can honestly say I'm very excited for. But the women's side of things, as we've said many times again, and I'll get to throughout the course of this show, a la Red Velvet and Mariah May. We'll talk about those 2 women too, because I definitely want to get in depth as far as their return and debut to AEW. So next up here, we had a matchup between Penta El Zero Miedo versus Swerve Strickland. Of course, in Penta's corner, Alex Abrahantes, and in Swerve Strickland's corner, Prince Nana. Both ringside for this one, jumping mid-match. Strickland laying some chops in on Penta. Penta turns him around and returns the favor. They slug it out. Penta Zero Miedo looking for the Here It Is driver. Stereo kicks, stereo lariats. Both men are down. Off the ropes, a pair of sling blades, fireman's carry into an inverted DDT. Now we see a back body drop, sending Swerve to the floor. Penta gets a flip pile driver on the apron, double stomp. Step up, Strickland counters a Michinoku driver into the turnbuckles. I mean, these guys were absolutely beating the living hell out of each other. It was physical, everything you would believe it to be. Swerve's matches are very tenacious. Same with Penta. So you kind of knew what we were getting into going into this matchup. Now Penta to the apron, trying to stay in it. Swerve then cuts him down with kicks, slingshot. Swerve stomps to the floor, a 450 splash. Nobody there. Penta rolls him over, pump handle driver. Strickland kicks out. Fear Factor reversed. House call, sidestepped, float over, back elbow, Swerve with an arm breaker of his own up top. Here we go, Swerve Strickland wins by pinfall with a Swerve stomp. Now post-match, Swerve was starting to tear at the mask of Penta. I feel like it's so much on AEW TV where the luchadors are getting their masks ripped off, or at least attempting to take off their masks, namely Penta and Rey Fenix. It feels like all the time throughout the tenure of AEW the last 3 or 4 years. But anyway, Swerve was tearing at the mask, but Hangman Adam Page showed up with a chair to stop him and wails on him with a chair. Chair shots to security, who try and break it up. Referees come down. We then see a Deadeye off the stage and through a table. Looked pretty vicious, and that pretty much concluded that segment. Hangman taking out Swerve Strickland towards the top of the entrance stage. So I'm very much so looking forward to this rematch from Wrestle Dream. Swerve Strickland versus Hangman Adam Page. These two had a great match there where Swerve came out victorious. I'm expecting a great match as well in this part 2. I would not be surprised if Swerve won yet again. I think, I don't want to say he needs it, but I think he's the one who should get this win. A definitive victory over Hangman Adam Page, a notable opponent, a former AEW World Champion, and so on. So we'll see. Now here we have Bullet Club Gold. They're getting interviewed backstage. Jay White says if MJF wants to play along, he will, and says maybe one day he'll see some metric that appeases his insecurities. Following this Jay White segment, we had Don Callis and Kenny Omega trade promos in a video package back and forth about how this does not end between them until one of them is gone. So whatever that means, we'll see. This is a match, and I'm going to get to this in a little bit, actually in a moment, coming up with this next segment with Jericho, Omega, and the Young Bucks. Now, I want to say it's this next episode of Dynamite that we're going to see the 8-man tag team match between Don Callis family and then Chris Jericho, Kenny Omega, Kota Ibushi, and of course, Paul White. No more BS Paul White, as he goes by now. Now, on the Don Callis side of things, we found out that it's going to be Kyle Fletcher, Will Ospreay, Powerhouse Hobbs, and Konosuke Takeshita. And I think this is going to be a great match. And realistically, this match between the Don Callis family versus Jericho, Omega, and company should have finished at Full Gear, right? I think that's really where it should have culminated at, not just on an episode of Dynamite. And I'm going to get to this next part here, and we kind of find out why, not necessarily why, Don Callis family isn't on the card, but, well, I guess you could say, yeah, we find out why Omega and Jericho are on the card. And so this next segment that I'm about to talk about tells us why we're not going to see the Don Callis family going up against the likes of Jericho and Omega and company, because they're going to be booked and busy with someone else. Now, leading into that, we see Kenny Omega and Chris Jericho backstage, interviewed by Renee Paquette. Jericho then says he thinks Don Callis didn't realize the caliber of friends they'd have to help them, and the Young Bucks then suddenly roll up, crying about Omega hanging around with Chris Jericho still, just like Matt Jackson was saying last week. Nick Jackson agrees to it, bickering back and forth while Kenny quietly was stewing. You could tell he was getting frustrated and obviously bothered here. Now, eventually, it gets to Jericho saying the two of them could beat the Bucks. And this did not obviously go over well with the Young Bucks. So the Young Bucks make it official, challenge them to a match at Full Gear. It was accepted. Chris liked the idea, but wants to put more steam on it and says when they win, they get the Bucks guaranteed tag team title shot. The Young Bucks then up the ante and say when they win, Kenny and Chris won't be allowed to team anymore. There will be no more Golden Jets. And then Kenny Omega finally chimed in, and he says if this is about who's the greatest tag team of all time, it's clearly the Young Bucks, but if it's about who can beat them, he's done it before with Kota Ibushi and Hangman Adam Page. And if they really want to do it all over again, they'll do it. And then maybe the Young Bucks will clean up their act and be like adults and not sissy, whiny, bitchy children. I feel like we've heard this before. It's kind of what CM Punk alluded to back at the Brawl Out, right? All Out press conference, Media Scrum 2022, which I'm going to get to in a minute as well, because it's just been crazy the last month or two with all the speculation and all the quote-unquote quotes being said in WWE and AEW television as to a teaser. Is CM Punk going to show up at Survivor Series or Royal Rumble 10 years to the day when he had his last match? Or will he be in WWE? Or will he be returning to AEW? Is he the one beneath that devil mask that has been presenting himself the last 6 or 7 weeks in all these segments and these guys he has attacking people backstage, Jay White and company, now Anthony Bowens, which we'll get to. And so it's just, it leaves you on the edge of your seat. It really does. Hearing all these references from two major companies, it's like, whoa, whether it's on commentary or whether it is from wrestlers in the ring or backstage, I find it to be very compelling. So wherever CM Punk does end up, it's just interesting that both sides decided to do this little back and forth intentionally or not. I think it's great. Jericho then says he'll take him to the woodshed and beat their spoiled brat asses. Now, although I did enjoy this backstage segment a lot, this match is official. It is going to be for Full Gear, and we're going to see these two go 2-on-2. But I think it would have been much more meaningful to conclude, again, back to the Don Callis family, who they've been feuding with the better part of the last several months, separate and together. Jericho and Omega, they've been dealing with Konosuke Takeshita and Will Ospreay and all these guys in singles and then in tag. And I feel like it would have been appropriate to end it at a pay-per-view. And so instead, they decided to end it a few days before their pay-per-view so that the Young Bucks could get their tag team match in their home of California, in the state of California. It's going to be at the Forum, I believe. And so, the Young Bucks are saying, hey, we can't have a pay-per-view in California without putting us on it. And so that's pretty much what it boiled down to in a significant match against Kenny Omega and Chris Jericho. And although I do think, again, it's going to deliver and be a great match, I would have much rather seen Kenny Omega and Chris Jericho and company go have a great match with Don Callis family. And finally, that would be the end of that. So just my 2 cents on the matter. It's going to be a busy week next week for Omega and Jericho. They got to take care of the Don Callis family Wednesday, and then Saturday or whenever it is. They have this major tag team matchup with major implications. They win, they get a tag title opportunity. If they lose, they can no longer tag again. So we shall see. And so now we're starting off the 9 o'clock hour with Limitless Keith Lee versus Samoa Joe for the Ring of Honor World Television Championship. Keith Lee, by the way, on Wednesday turned 39 years old, so happy belated birthday to him. So now we see a code of honor between the two. Circling, collar and elbow. Joe backs him into the corner. Back to the lockup. Side headlock from Samoa Joe. Shot off, shoulder block. Joe bounces off, rake of the eyes, off the ropes, shoulder block, takes Keith Lee down. Off the ropes, Keith ducks a lariat and battering rams him with a shoulder block. Clubbing blows, Lee asks if he wants to rake eyes and return the favor. Then we see him choking him in the ropes. Joe breaks free, chops into the corner, set up the jabs, overwhelming Keith with a flurry of punches. Off the ropes, leapfrog, drop down crossbody, freight train, Samoa, and we go to a break. Now, when returning from that commercial break, you see body blows in the corner from Keith Lee. He's fired up. Joe then cuts him off. Knee breaker, sets up a dragon screw, laying chops in. Big boot. Senton. Keith catches him into a waist lock and deadlifts him up for a German suplex. Off the ropes, Lee gets the spirit bomb, but he's too spent to cover him. Rolling into it, Joe kicks out, however. As we approach the finish here, Samoa Joe trips him up, catches him in the coquina clutch. Nowhere to go. Lee fades, but he's got a fight left in him. Kicking his legs, Joe keeps the hold locked on, and referee Paul Turner has to call it. Samoa Joe wins by referee stoppage with the coquina clutch, retaining his Ring of Honor World Television Championship. Now, this is where it got really interesting, and, before I get to that, what happened post-match and Samoa Joe getting on the microphone, I'm not saying Keith Lee should have won this match due to the fact it was his 39th birthday. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying, however, is what we're about to find out and what Samoa Joe does with his Ring of Honor World Championship that he held for the better part of 545 days, I believe it was said. Let's just get to the post-match. So Samoa Joe cuts a promo in the ring. He says he's the greatest Ring of Honor World Television Champion of all time, but he didn't come here just to be a TV champ. And if hunger defines the greats, he's officially hungry. He's going to vacate his Ring of Honor World Television Championship, which came to the surprise of many. You could hear the people in the crowd saying, like, whoa, like, oh my goodness, I can't believe this is happening. And say what you want about Ring of Honor, how their titles are meaningless, whatever. I do get that. But nonetheless, he's still vacating a championship that he's held for a very long time. So leave it at that. He then lays the belt down in the ring and says the next gold on his shoulder will be the AEW World Championship, whether Max likes it or not. Although it makes Joe look strong in one sense, I do get that. He never lost to anybody, and he decided to vacate this title to potentially team up with MJF. I guess by default, becoming one half of the Ring of Honor Tag Team Champions, at least in a defending sense, right? Stepping in for the injured Adam Cole. Although this does make Joe strong still, he never lost, he relinquished it, and somebody else is going to get this opportunity in Ring of Honor. That's great, good for them. Whoever's to vie for that TV title, again, 545-day reign or so, that's very impressive. But Keith Lee, I mean, if there's anybody in that company that needs a shot in the ass, a little momentum, it's Keith Lee. I would have loved to see him beat Joe in some sense of the word, or it also could have been due to a referee stoppage, much like Joe did to Lee. It could have been the other way around. Again, I get it. A loss is a loss, but it wouldn't have been Samoa Joe getting pinned for the 1, 2, 3. It wouldn't have been Samoa Joe tapping out to whatever submission hold Keith Lee would have locked in on him. So I don't know. I just think of things like that. Again, not completely against the decision of him vacating it. I think it's a good idea in the very short term and long term for Samoa Joe. And getting back on AEW television full time, especially vying for that AEW World title sooner than later, yet again, as he did at Grand Slam back in September against MJF. But I think it would have been good also looking at Keith Lee, right? Keith Lee could definitely use it as well. So we'll see. Hopefully they keep him in some kind of contention, and that's not it for Keith Lee. It wasn't just a birthday gift, just having a title match, and then we don't see him again. So here we had Orange Cassidy cut a promo backstage. He says Jon Moxley must have lost his mind if he thinks he doesn't respect him, because he's been the only thing on his mind since Mox left him laying in a pool of his own blood. He's not sorry for getting the title back, but holding it doesn't feel the same, because he needs to beat Jon Moxley in order to be the international champion he knows that he is. So I like that. Very strong from Orange Cassidy, and he's right. He does need to not just for his sake, but I think for all of us, right? I think it would be a breath of fresh air. I don't think it's necessarily going to happen. I think Moxley's going to win his title back, win this international championship back yet again at Full Gear, much like he did against Orange Cassidy at All In, Wembley, London. But we'll see. We'll see if Orange Cassidy can make it happen. I know TK loves Orange Cassidy. Maybe he'll shock the world and have him retain, but I think the right decision is getting that title back on Moxley. See, here we had a nonsensical match. I don't even know why this match took place. No knock to the opponents, but it was even beyond a squash match. This was in the blink of an eye. Literally, if you blink, this match was over. We see Austin and Colton Gunn of Bullet Club Gold going up against the Bollywood Boyz. Colton started off, and he basically, took him down. Quick tag right into a pinfall here. That was pretty much it. A 310 to Yuma squash match to the fullest. And so there wasn't really much to say here other than the post-match. We got to see them alongside Juice Robinson and Cardblade. That's the cardboard cutout of Switchblade, Jay White they have. They're in the ring for a promo. Colton says Maxwell Jacob Friedman has been lying to the people about being a generational talent when it's them who have walked right into TV and became tag team champions. Now, Austin Gunn says MJF is an embarrassment as AEW World Champion, and the only friends that he has left are on the other side of the guardrail, and he hopes that he picks one of these fat pieces of shit for his partner at Full Gear, so they can then hit a 310 to Yuma on them as well. Now we see Samoa Joe approaching MJF with a grin backstage immediately following this segment. However, MJF immediately moves on and basically wanted no part of Samoa Joe. Now, I was just talking about Orange Cassidy and that AEW International Championship situation he has going up against Moxley at Full Gear. And now we see Jon Moxley with Wheeler Yuta backstage for a promo. Now, Moxley says he's been getting calls all week to let Orange off the hook, but he says Cassidy knew exactly what he was doing and that this isn't about a belt. It's about the laws of nature. This place is a jungle. And what kind of example is he setting for a young Wheeler Yuta if he doesn't beat the piss out of Orange Cassidy? What kind of example would he be setting for Hook? He doesn't even deserve to get the Full Gear. So the minute they land at LAX, it's on. Gang warfare, him and whoever he wants to bring. Jon Moxley then tells Hook to take notes if his fingers still work. Wheeler Yuta calls Hook out and says he crossed the wrong crew and they'll see him in Cali. So that was pretty much that as far as Moxley and Wheeler Yuta are concerned. Talking about Orange Cassidy and Hook. Now, I know I mentioned those 6 matches a little while ago that are scheduled at Full Gear, 5 for the main card, 1 on the 0 hour, the kickoff show. I'm pretty sure that we're also going to be seeing Wheeler Yuta going one-on-one with Hook at Full Gear as well. If it's not to be set to take place at Dynamite or Collision in the coming week. So that also, I would assume that's going to be on the 0 hour as well. Not to say it's not qualified to be on the Full Gear card, but we'll see. We'll see what happens with those two. But they'll be clashing sooner than later. Now here we have Wardlow cutting a promo about his potential being wasted and how he's felt worthless, and all because of Maxwell Jacob Friedman MJF. Now, if we're talking non-storyline here, from a storyline standpoint, this makes 1,000% sense, right? But if we're talking real life and how Wardlow has been booked and what he say, wasted and felt worthless, I get it. 3 TNT championship reigns have been worthless, unfortunately, booked like crap. They have not done much with him. Every time it looks like he's going to get some kind of momentum, it's squashed. He hasn't felt truly important since pretty much being alongside MJF, and maybe just shortly thereafter when he dominated MJF at Double or Nothing 2022. What was it, like 10 power bombs, and then he got the victory over MJF in a squash match pretty much. And outside of that, there's been nothing compelling about Wardlow. It's sad to say, I'm a big fan of his, but we'll see what happens. I have been loving these video packages of his these past 2, 3, 4 weeks, however long it's been. I love his demeanor. I hope they keep him on this kind of trajectory. And if and when he is to face MJF, of course, MJF is Jay White, and he's got Samoa Joe lurking. And then, of course, Wardlow. He's got all these people coming at him from every which way. Who's the guy beneath the devil mask, right? Who is this group that will probably come at him inevitably sooner than later, too? We'll see. Is it Jack Perry? Is it Adam Cole? Could it be CM Punk? There's so many things to figure out, and all signs are pointing to them wanting a piece of MJF sooner than later. So we'll see. I just hope that this momentum does not end with Wardlow once he gets to MJF, and then let's just say he loses, right? He loses to MJF wherever it's at, whether it's on Dynamite, Collision, the pay-per-view, and then what? Then it's like, all right, back to the I'm tired of going back to the drawing board with Wardlow. It's just too much. But again, they're doing a great job with these video packages, and I'll give them credit for that. All right, so for this next match here, I should be really excited about talking about it, and I still kind of am. However, I'm not going to go over the match in its entirety. I probably will talk more about the post-match than the match itself, and that's between the returning Red Velvet, who has been out for the better part of 2023 with a right knee injury, going up against the likes of Julia Hart, who also celebrated a birthday on Wednesday, much like Keith Lee. She only turned 22. I think she's the youngest signee to AEW of all time, outside of like Nick Wayne and Billy Stark. But anyway, she turned 22 on Wednesday, so shout out to Julia Hart as well. Happy birthday to her. And so Red Velvet, she made her way out straight of your mama's kitchen. Time to stir it up, as she often says. And, she was also a former baddie of Jade Cargill, just like Kiera Hogan was, and what was it, Layla Gray and all them. So, I'm a big fan of Red Velvet, I have to say. And she was put in a very precarious position numerous times, but especially on this night. Returning after being away, 7, 8 months, with this knee injury, going up against the likes of Julia Hart on her birthday. So I said, oh, here we go. Red Velvet potentially losing her return match. She's been obviously doing a great job rehabbing. She visibly looked great, her physique, as she typically usually does, but she looked great in the ring as well. So a fantastic return match for her. I love women's wrestling. I just want to put it out there, and I'm not covering this match bit by bit as I've done a lot of the play-by-plays lately in my reviews and even during this review, because I want to get to what I want to talk about after it, right? So Julia Hart won this match by pinfall after hitting a moonsault on Red Velvet, and post-match, Julia locked in her Heartless submission hold on Red Velvet. However, Sky Blue made the save. The two then square up. Hart looks her up and down, and then here comes the TBS champion, Chris Statlander. We see Willow Nightingale. Chris then steps in front of Sky Blue, then circles around her, and then they let Hart leave while Willow Nightingale helps Red Velvet to her feet on the outside. So there was just a lot of confusion coming out of this match. We had Willow Nightingale outside helping Red Velvet. We had Sky Blue in the ring staring down Julia Hart. Chris Statlander gets involved. Will it be Chris Statlander versus Julia Hart at Full Gear in a rematch? Will it be Chris Statlander going up against Sky Blue? All honestly, the more I think about it, we may be getting a triple threat match for the TBS Championship at Full Gear, which I'm not completely opposed to either, between Chris Statlander, between Julia Hart, and then insert Sky Blue. So we'll see. That would definitely be a good one. Don't get me wrong, but back to what we really need to discuss here. We need to talk about Red Velvet. All right, there has been, no video packages, no vignettes, nothing about her return. She's a great wrestler in her early 30s, I believe. And throughout the course of her AEW tenure these last few years, they really have not done right by Red Velvet. They could get so much more out of her. She always seems like she's on the losing side of things. Again, much like Wardlow in a sense. At least Wardlow was champion at some point in time. Red Velvet has yet to touch any gold in AEW. And, I just feel like she's highly underutilized. And every time it seems like she's getting some sense of momentum, it seems to be taken back drastically. One step forward, never mind two. It's like 10 steps back. Red Velvet was really excited for this return, and rightfully so. She's been sidelined for the better part of 2023 on social media. It seemed like every other day she was, posting some kind of content of her training, whether it was in the gym, in the ring, doing cardio, you name it. Red Velvet was giving us reason to believe that she will come back full strength, better than she's ever been. Excited for this opportunity to return to the AEW women's division. And if you were not to follow her social media like I do, you wouldn't know any of this. All you would have known was a couple days prior to Dynamite that she was advertised for a match against Julia Hart, a one-on-one matchup, and that was it. Again, no video packages, no vignettes. If they're doing it, if they've done so for Wardlow at least, giving him that much lately, they've done so for Toni Storm, putting all this emphasis in her video packages and vignettes. And you can't, give Red Velvet, who's been out for the majority of 2023, one or two, coming soon or returning soon, vignettes or videos, letting us know she's ready and she's not going to let injuries or anything keep her down or sideline or sidetrack. So I feel like they're doing her a real disservice, simply put. Having her return without any real notice, giving her an L immediately. I get it. It's a formidable opponent in Julia Hart, who they're building up majorly, potentially a TBS champion in the near future. And Red Velvet, it's like, what's next? It's she returned, she took an L, and now what are they going to do with her? So it upsets me to see them, misuse people, men and women. And AEW is not the only company that does it. They all do it. But I'm just saying, when you see potential there, when you see how hungry they are, whether they're trying to reinvent themselves, bring themselves back from injuries of sorts, and then to just kind of, throw them aside, I just hate to see it. Underappreciated. So that's just my 2 cents on the whole Red Velvet situation. Hopefully she's booked good from here on out. Even if they were to put her predominantly on Ring of Honor, which I would hate to see, I want to see her on AEW TV. But if you're going to put her on Ring of Honor, at least put her in title contention, going up against the likes of Athena, obviously. And if you were to tell me, even though it's kind of irrelevant to a lot of people, the whole Ring of Honor bit, unless you subscribe to Honor Club, you don't get to see the matches. That's why I don't watch Ring of Honor, because I don't subscribe to it. It's enough wrestling I see on a daily basis: WWE, NXT, all the AEW shows, Impact even. So it's hard to keep up with so much wrestling. But that being said, even if you were to tell me that Red Velvet is going to spend some time in Ring of Honor, maybe just to get used to wrestling again and making a comeback, getting her reps in per se, I would love to see her take down the likes of Athena for two reasons. Kind of like I said about Ruby Soho recently. If they're not going to utilize Ruby Soho on AEW television or have her see gold anytime soon, then you know what? It would be a trade of sorts. Bring Ruby to Ring of Honor, have Ruby inevitably take down the likes of Athena, give Ruby the championship, and then bring Athena to AEW TV, much like they're doing with Samoa Joe, right? Samoa Joe did not lose. He relinquished his title, but now it seems they're going to move Samoa Joe full-time to AEW, and that's where he should be. Let's be honest here. And that's how I feel about Athena. You know, Athena needs to drop that Ring of Honor championship she's held. It's been about a year now, right? That she's held, whether it is to a Ruby Soho, whether it is to a Red Velvet, I'd be okay with either of those women taking Athena down. And then they get to be champions on Ring of Honor, hold the gold, book them correctly as a champion. They probably won't be booked as strong as Athena because a year title reign is a long time. That's fantastic. But again, Ruby, Red Velvet, two women that should definitely win that Ring of Honor Women's Championship. Bring Athena over to AEW. And now let's finally get some momentum under Athena from an AEW standpoint. Great year with Ring of Honor. I do get that. I don't discount that, even though I only saw a handful of her matches. You know, one was in person over the summer when I was at Ring of Honor Death Before Dishonor in July. Great show in Trenton, New Jersey. Awesome match with Willow Nightingale. So I can only imagine the things she's done on Ring of Honor. But let's bring that to a broader audience in AEW, you know, weekly, TBS, TNT, and let's really showcase Athena for what she deserves. And in the meantime, Red Velvet, Ruby Soho, at least they're not back there in catering, doing nothing. They'll be on Ring of Honor, hopefully as champion, having great matches for themselves as well. Build up their self-esteem, their confidence, and their reps, and get some wins in the meantime. Now, in this next segment, we're backstage with RJ City with AEW's newest acquisition, Mariah May. Now, I'm not very familiar with her work. I know who she is. I know she's been in Japan the better part of the last year. With a lot of success. I believe she's attained some gold over there. Again, don't know a lot about her work. We'll look into it now. But now she's debuting with AEW. Again, much like Red Velvet coming back to a loss with no build, no video packages, no vignettes. I said, what are we doing here? There's been a lot of hype, especially the past month, about this Mariah May being a free agent and coming to AEW specifically. The last couple weeks, it's rumored that maybe WWE or AEW were interested in her. Here we are. She's debuting with AEW in a backstage segment before the main event. What are we doing here? I mean, she looked great. Good to see her. I know we'll see her next Wednesday, I believe. RJ City said, you know, we're going to get to that in a minute, introducing her to Toni Storm, and we know she's probably going to be teaming up with her and so on. They'll have a storyline. That's all good and well, right? That's probably going to go great. But how do you just, by the way, debut her backstage with RJ City? I don't understand. So anyway, Mariah May says she's wrestled all over the world and she's excited to be part of the AEW women's division, and she's a big fan of Toni Storm's work and came here because of her. RJ City then promises to introduce her next week, and she fangirls out, then kisses him on the cheek. Of course, that had the internet going wild, saying, man, RJ's one lucky guy. Now, this signing has been expected for weeks, as I mentioned. You know, her potentially being part of this whole new timeless Toni Storm bit with, you know, I don't know if she's going to be her sidekick or just part of the entourage, it seems. But we'll see. Definitely going to be an acquaintance with her for sure. I dig it. I think it's going to go well. I really do. Seems like, you know, I don't know her wrestling at all. It seems she's good enough to be picked up by AEW and potentially some interest from WWE. So I guess Mariah May is no slouch. She obviously has a great look. She's pretty good on a microphone from what I saw backstage, in that backstage segment rather. So it's good. We'll see, you know, but again, the presentation, it's everything, right? And you just, by the way, debuted her. I'm sure it will go well going forward, but it's all about the initial, right? That first impression. So I don't know what to make of it, but we shall see sooner than later as far as what happens with Mariah May. Now, I did find it very interesting online, and somebody on Twitter had written, my theory on the whole Mariah May / Toni Storm story is that they are doing the quote unquote All About Eve plot. To explain it, All About Eve is a 1950s classic film that tells the story of Eva Harrington, which would be Mariah May, who manipulates successful actress Margot Channing, who would then be Toni Storm, to achieve fame herself. Now, the person who had put out this tweet at Peps_wrestling, shout out to them, because if this was their take on the matter, or this came from them directly, I think it's a great take. And they went on to say Tony Khan even made a reference to it by saying, quote unquote, all about Mariah in his Twitter post. And they went on to say this would be a story with great potential and could lead to Mariah becoming a star in a very short period of time. Now, I couldn't agree more. I think that is an awesome catch. Again, if this was by them specifically or whoever did, dig this up, I think it's phenomenal. And that'd be pretty cool. That'd be a pretty cool take, eventually getting the best of Toni Storm, using her essentially to make her way into AEW, and I would assume eventually title contention, being that Tony's certainly in the conversation, going to be the challenger going up against three-time AEW Women's World Champion Hikaru Shida at Full Gear. So I found that to be pretty intriguing, and I wanted to share that with you guys. I actually found that right before I got on here for this podcast. So that's pretty good. We'll see what Mariah May is all about. Again, unfamiliar with her work, but it seems like she'll be off to a good start. Presentation could have been better, but what are you going to do? So here it is, main event time. Switchblade Jay White going one-on-one with Marc Briscoe. If Marc Briscoe is to defeat Switchblade Jay White, as I said earlier in this podcast, then Marc Briscoe would then take the place of Jay White at Full Gear for that number one contendership for the AEW World Championship, and then would be facing MJF at Full Gear. We all knew this wouldn't happen, but again, good to see Marc Briscoe in the main event of Dynamite nonetheless. So this one starts off collar and elbow, struggling around the ring in the corner for a break. Side headlock from Briscoe, shot off, shoulder block. Jay White bails to the floor. We're back inside, headlock takeovers, trying to grind Marc Briscoe down. Briscoe gets out, chops straight suplex, cover for two. We then see Jay White put Marc Briscoe up top, jockeying for position. Briscoe with a missile drop kick, trading forearms in the middle of the ring. Marc Briscoe fires up with chops on chops, elbows off the ropes. Trading charging strikes, big elbow from Briscoe. Front kick, Hangman's neckbreaker connects, cover for two. Then we see a Fisherman Buster for another 2 count. Not enough. Uranagi connected. Briscoe staggered. See a Kiwi Crusher. Marc kicked out. Laying chops in. Jay White with a chop block. Block the Jay Driller. Shoulder knee breaker. Sleeper suplex. Front chancery. Sheer drop brain buster. Then we see Jay White drawing Marc Briscoe up for the Blade Runner. Marc with chops to the neck. But Jay grabs him and spikes him with the sleeper suplex. Another brain buster sets it up. Jay White wins by pinfall, of course, with his Blade Runner to get the victory as we expected, especially with the stipulation at hand here. There was no way that Jay White was going to lose this match and lose that opportunity at the AEW World Championship at Full Gear against MJF, even though he's held that title in his possession, as I said at the start of this show, for the better part of a month. So what's it really matter at this point, right? He's holding on to it. Now, post-match, MJF pops up behind Bullet Club Gold and he cleans house with his Dynamite Diamond ring. He then faces off with Jay White. He holds the ring up, but Switchblade bails and runs away. MJF tells him he hopes he's had fun playing dress-up because playtime is almost over and he's going to have to get in the ring with the real world champion soon. Again, another CM Punk reference talking about who is the real world champion before I get to the conclusion of AEW Dynamite. How many gems has AEW and, again, WWE dropped over the past couple of months? Is it CM Punk going to show up in WWE? Will he somehow return to AEW? And this is all some kind of elaborate work. Unbelievable. So we'll see. MJF calling himself the real world champion. And there's been numerous other times, even during this show, right? When Kenny was with the Young Bucks backstage with Chris Jericho, when he called them children and that he needed to tell them that and so on. So again, another reference from CM Punk discussing the Young Bucks. Better part of a year ago, right? That all-out media scrum 2022. So you just can't help but wonder. And even to this next bit that I'm going to get to, which concluded the show with the Real Glass, talking about Jack Perry and CM Punk, which pretty much exploded into CM Punk eventually getting fired coming out of All In. With the glass spot, right? Jack Perry and Hook, so we'll get to that too. So MJF got on the microphone and proceeded to say when he won that title, he promised himself he'd go down as the greatest AEW World Champion ever, or die trying. And that's what he's dealing with. Jay is going to have to kill him to beat him, because he's not just fighting for him anymore. He's fighting for everyone that's been on this journey with him, for Adam Cole, for everyone watching at home, and for everyone in this arena, because he's our scumbag. He goes on to say, when he's the only thing standing between Jay White and immortality at Full Gear, will he be the first man to pull the trigger? And when this was said, the lights went out. We see 3 or 4 men dressed in all black, much like we saw 5 or 6 weeks ago, backstage area when Jay White was attacked. But now at this moment in time, it seemed like we saw the Acclaimed getting attacked, Anthony Bowens, Max Caster, even Daddy Ass, Billy Gunn. They end up throwing Anthony Bowens through a plate glass window. Now, I was just referencing the whole glass spot, right? This is another CM Punk reference, potentially, with, and we'll talk about this in a minute, who it could be under these masks or these outfits Could it be Jack Perry, right? Alluding to the whole glass spot with CM Punk. CM Punk many months ago told Jack not to use real glass. He decided to use real glass in that match against Hook at All In, which led to their backstage scrum prior to the start of All In, or prior to CM Punk's match, rather. And so that's another thing that's very interesting. Now, after Anthony Bowens was thrown through this glass window, we briefly see the man in the devil mask. We've seen this flashed often for weeks now. And now back at ringside, when the lights went back up, MJF runs like a madman possessed, checks out the Acclaim to see how they're all doing. Obviously, they weren't doing well, but just to check on them nonetheless. All the masked assailants nowhere to be found. And Samoa Joe walks up and says, "It looks like you're running out of friends, champ." He then walks off laughing. Now we wonder, who are these four men dressed in all black? And who is the fifth beneath this devil mask? It really piques curiosity. We've been trying to think about this, or we have been thinking about this for the better part of a month and a half now. Could it be, Adam Cole, Kyle O'Reilly, Roderick Strong, Mike Bennett, Matt Taven? Are those the five? Again, could it be the likes of Jack Perry leading this? Could it be CM Punk? I mean, that would be the least likely, in my opinion, in a lot of people's estimation, but some think that this is him. And one of the main reasons this is so compelling is, three men this could possibly be. It's been mentioned: CM Punk, Adam Cole, Jack Perry, three names that have been mentioned much throughout this whole guessing game of sorts. MJF lost that devil mask that he had for the past year at Wembley, at All In. So it's been noted that's where he lost it. There, two of those three men we have not seen since All In, that being CM Punk and Jack Perry. And I know those were the two men that got in their scuffle backstage. So who took the mask? Was it one of them? Was it CM Punk? Was it Jack Perry? Was it Adam Cole, who shared a locker room with MJF, them being the Ring of Honor tag team champions and best friends, of course? All Adam Cole would have to do is dip into his bag or just go to the very next locker and take that mask. So I would have to assume those are the only three likely suspects that could be wearing that devil mask. Of course, we all wonder as well, who are the men dressed in black? That also piques our curiosity too. Who are the assailants with him? But I think the main thing here is, who is the one leading this charge? I know it's even been said before that maybe this is an elaborate plan by Britt Baker. Maybe Adam Cole isn't involved and it's Britt, because Britt Baker has such disdain for MJF. She never wanted MJF and Adam Cole to be friends. So maybe she's setting this up behind the scenes, perhaps. But it really is interesting. And I got to say that whenever we do find out, I think it's going to be pretty shocking to all of us, regardless if it is Jack Perry, if it is Adam Cole, or, if it is CM Punk. That would be something else, to say the least. So that was the conclusion of AEW Dynamite this week. And we can't forget, right? This was said many moons ago by CM Punk in his Ring of Honor days. And it's been referenced many times throughout AEW television the past year or two, ever since CM Punk and MJF were feuding early on for that dog collar match and such, that the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing you people he didn't exist. So we'll see who's under that devil mask. So sooner than later, we're going to find out who is with him in this. And I think it's going to be very, very good TV, because it's already good in the sense of it's got all of us wondering. It's a big guessing game. And so that's that. But that's the review of AEW Dynamite. Again, this is the November 8th edition. I hope you all enjoyed this review. And if you could, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Also follow me on all my social media platforms. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, even Snapchat. Once in a while, I'll go on there when I'm at a show and, record some footage of the show itself. So, or meet and greets and stuff like that. So, yeah, definitely check me out on all those platforms. I appreciate you guys immensely. Oh, and TikTok. How could I forget TikTok? You got to follow me on there as well. I'm most active on Instagram and TikTok, but you'll see me on Twitter once in a while and the Snapchat as well. And so thank you guys. I'm your host, Pat Deneen. This is the Turnbuckle Topics Podcast. I'll catch you next time. Thanks for listening.